Are Cygors any good? I've been really looking forward to this one. On the other side, fighting Beastman factions, I always found it very hard to stop Cygors from doing their damage with impunity. On the other hand, they can be frustratingly hard to use. How can we make Cygors work for you? Stay tuned. Please like, subscribe, comment, and consider donating to my Ko-fi page. Thank you, new subscribers! Tell your friends! That's a plea, not an order. Thanks! This footage uses my usual Empire control group, but as you can see, Cygors make it so that the enemy definitely comes to you, rather than sits around. On the other hand, Beastmen tend not to be a ranged faction as a whole. Okay, you've caught the car, now what? Well, let's look at the Cygors themselves. Cygors have the same 6500 mass that Giants do, but are only quote-unquote 9800 HP on Ultra, with 50 armor, same as Giants, and 25% magic resistance, which makes magic sniping them frustratingly difficult. Leadership is 75, well below the 100 of Giants. Speed is 39, which is identical, and which is going to matter a lot in this video. Melee attack is 44, which is nowhere near that of the Giant, but which is quite respectable. Attack interval of 4 is not terrible at all. Splash targets is a maximum of 6, so its damage is more focused than the Giant for better or worse. Melee defense is 25, which is simply not good. Weapon damage is 450, divided between 135 base and 315 armor piercing, which is a very good ratio, and as you can see in one of my videos, if the enemy lord is YOLOing your Cygor, it can defend itself reasonably well. When it connects, it hurts. Charge bonus is 28, which won't win any awards, but the more you stare at it, the more you realize it's not bad, considering how awful most missile units are at charging. Before moving on, the Cygor inflicts not just fear, but terror as well. Is a woodsman unit with no force penalty whatsoever, though trees will eat your missiles. And just having a Cygor present makes enemy spellcasters miscast at a much higher rate should they overcast with a living Cygor on the map. Now, what about those boulders the Cygors chuck? Usually a so-called special ranged weapon has low ammo, but this one has 25 ammo. Range is a healthy 400, and missile damage is formally 373, with a direct missile damage of 84 base and 336 armor piercing, and an explosion effect with a modest detonation range of 6, and 55 base, 85 armor piercing for the pure explosive effect. However, the reload time is 15, which brings down its rating. Here, the calibration distance, where the weapon is at normal accuracy, is 320, so further out from that and it gets more inaccurate. Calibration area is 55, so even under the best of circumstances, there's a lot of variation between where you aim and where you hit. You see this in the video. In fact, the simple act of advancing an army makes a lot of shots miss, so I try moving Cygors out to flank. Well, the accuracy/inaccuracy means that this can get some of your own units wrecked, but nonetheless, hitting across the length of a rectangle has much greater damage potential than hitting its depth. How do we buff them up? Beast Lord Spite works the same for them as it does for the Ungor Raiders. I think. The text only specifies the reload reduction. So assuming it fully works, speed gets up to 12% buffed, ammunition plus 20%, and reload time comes down 10%. Mage Hunter definitely works at rank 7, giving missile strength plus 12%, reload time minus 10%, and another 15% spell resistance, which means 40% resistance for the Cygor. Also, the reload time reductions are an effective missile strength buff, and the higher the reload time is to begin with, the more a percentage reduction is impactful. Challenges of the Dark Gods. Rampage applies to Cygors too, so that's a 10% buff to melee weapon strength, and as I said, that's weighted toward AP. Roaming Torment gives 15% ammunition to Cygor units and reduces their reload time by a final 10%, and minus 30% is something you will notice when it started at 15 to begin with. That's it for buffs, but that's a lot. So, what do we do with these guys? That gets complicated. In a typical battle, either you are charging the enemy or the enemy is charging you, and the lines are joined in fairly short order. In Warhammer 3, with the increased reload times, there simply isn't enough time for Cygors to hang back and act like artillery. They'll never get off all their boulder shots in a normal situation. Yes, you can try to attack rear-line archer units, and you see in my footage how iffy that prospect is. Yeah, you can do it some. In the second video, I had a Cygors unit harass the ranged stuff to help with a Bestigor versus Storm Vermin with swords and shields brawl. This is not something that resembles the Cygors taking control. What else would you do in a campaign setting? Well, a bunch of things. There are cases where your Cygors are the bait for Ungor Raider ambushes. And, as my video established, a superior force of Ungor Raiders can whittle down lighter armored foes very hard. How about chariots running around and distracting the foe, getting them chased while Cygors punish the enemy? This sort of thing is possible, especially if it's a lord on a chariot. Still, odds are that the enemy will charge in after enough of this. What about sieges? That's a problem. Cygors don't do enough damage to whittle down towers properly. They can bring down walls given enough time, but if that's your goal, you might as well get a giant there to bash it. Cygors aren't useless anyway, but they're only barely getting you into the game for sieges in that sense. Well, what about the summons? Now we're starting to get serious, because not only is there a lord ability, there's an item that lets you summon a Cygor, and here's where you start truly embracing the chaos. See, the AI only sees Cygors as artillery. Yes, Cygors are annoying like that, but they're not going to break you. Cygors in melee inflict terror. If they go into a melee they're going to win, then stuff's going to run and or crumble. And then you have a fully functional Cygor standing there with boulders to toss. The summons has the advantage of appearing where you choose within range, so that helps, but come on, 6500 mass. You can walk these guys where they need to go. You are not confined to missile work with them. You can use the missiles where you need to without sacrificing anything else. Totally besides what I've mentioned, I've only gone over the difficulties of using Cygors against loose infantry formations. A lucky hit on artillery, or a calculated hit on heavily armored cavalry, and the enemy has a real problem. On top of that, your options are a bit limited against flying opponents. The Cygor shows no respect to gyrocopters or the like, stuff that utterly frustrates your Ungor Raiders, but eats armor piercing from Cygor throwing axes. The problem there being range. Cygors don't suffer from that problem. They have lots of range and lots of ammo. Finally, the spell resistance means that they're all that more resistant to your magic. You want to drop that pit of shades? Evacuate everything else? Drop the shades? Rejoice at the screaming of your dying foes. It works. I just mentioned pit because it's stationary. You need to make a determination at every turn whether your Cygors are better off rock chucking than wading into combat, including against heroes and lords. You have a roster filled with units that are not very good against lords, but Cygors are okay at it. Okay is good enough in a lot of cases. I needed the footage, so I didn't try this in the first 2 skirmish battles, but I could have taken these Cygors, grouped them with my lord, and go trying to gank the enemy lord with ranged at first and then in melee. Sounds crazy? That's why it works. If you compare Cygor to artillery, you will hate them. If you compare Cygor to flesh versions of Iron Demons, a hybrid ranged and melee unit that is completely okay at both, you'll understand that as much as you'd prefer to use them in range, sometimes it's necessary to get bloody and personal. Don't be afraid of that. Make your enemies afraid of it. Take care, and have fun being the one to cast the first stone.